Welcome back to Nomico channel. Today is January 31st, 2026, and the AI world is absolutely buzzing. From massive GPU deals in China, to new custom chips from Microsoft and Alibaba, to security, governance, and even a little drama around how big tech is or isn't monetizing AI. Let's dive into today's AI news roundup. First up, a huge development in the global AI chip race. Story number one comes from Engadget Tech News, published January 30th, 2026. The article reports via Reuters that Chinese AI company DeepSeek has reportedly received approval from the Chinese government to purchase NVIDIA's H200 AI chips. ByteDance, Alibaba, and Tencent have also reportedly been cleared to buy a combined total of about 400,000 H200 GPUs. Now, this is a big deal because the H200 is NVIDIA's second best data center GPU, only behind the B200, and is said to be around 6 times more powerful than the H200 model that was previously allowed for export to China. In December 2025, the US government agreed to let NVIDIA sell these H200 processors plus the H200 to vetted Chinese companies, but with a 25% tariff on those sales. According to Engadget's summary of Reuters reporting, China had earlier discouraged local firms from buying the weaker H200 chips, but after NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang visited China, Beijing agreed to import hundreds of thousands of H200 units instead. China's National Development and Reform Commission is still finalizing the conditions companies like DeepSeek, ByteDance, Alibaba, and Tencent must meet before shipments can actually go through. And Huang himself has said NVIDIA hasn't yet received formal orders, so this is all still in the licensing and approval phase. There's also a geopolitical edge here. Engadget notes that in the US, DeepSeek's potential purchase may face scrutiny, especially after a lawmaker accused NVIDIA of helping DeepSeek develop AI models allegedly used by the Chinese military. So this story sits at the intersection of AI capability, trade policy, and national security. That leads us nicely into another angle of the AI chip story, domestic alternatives. Story number 2. Alibaba's chip arm, T-Head, has just launched its own high-end AI chip. This comes from TechNode, published January 30th, 2026. The chip is called Zhenwu A110E, and according to Alibaba, is built on a fully in-house technology stack. TechNode reports that the Zhenwu 810E comes with 96 GB of HBM2E memory and 700 GB per second of inter-chip bandwidth. Performance-wise, Alibaba claims it's comparable to NVIDIA's H200, and that some upgraded versions can even surpass the A100, which was NVIDIA's flagship data center GPU just a couple of generations ago. So when you put TechNode's report about Zhenwu 810E next to Engadget's coverage of China seeking H200s, you get a clear picture. Chinese companies are trying to balance two strategies. On one side, they are still hungry for NVIDIA's top-tier chips because the H200 and B200 are simply ahead. On the other, they are investing heavily in domestic designs like Alibaba's Zhenwu line to reduce long-term dependence on US suppliers. And it's not just China building its own silicon. Story number 3. Microsoft is pushing forward with its own AI hardware for the cloud. This update comes from MarkTech Post AI News, published January 30th, 2026. They report that Microsoft has unveiled the Maia 200, a new in-house AI accelerator designed specifically for inference in Azure data centers. According to MarkTech Post, the Maia 200 targets the cost of token generation for large language models and other reasoning-heavy workloads. It does this by leaning into narrow precision computing FP4 and FP8 combined with a dense on-chip memory hierarchy and an Ethernet-based scale-up fabric for clustering. In plain language, Microsoft is optimizing these chips for the answering questions side of AI, not just the expensive training side. Running models cheaply and at scale is becoming just as important as training them, especially as more apps and services integrate LLMs. So between NVIDIA's H200, Alibaba's Zhenwu 810E, and Microsoft's Maia 200, you can see a clear theme. Everyone wants their own stack, from silicon to software. But there's a catch. All this infrastructure is expensive and is starting to show up in policy debates. Story number 4. How much should a country spend to stay digitally sovereign in the AI era? This discussion comes from the Register, surfaced via Hacker News AI topics and linked on January 30th, 2026. The article is titled One Digital Sovereignty That Will Be 1% of Your GDP into AI Infrastructure. According to the Register's coverage of Gartner's analysis, if a country really wants digital sovereignty, meaning it controls its own data, cloud, and AI compute, instead of relying entirely on foreign hyperscalers, it may need to invest on the order of 1% of its GDP into AI infrastructure, data centers, chips, networks, and the ecosystem around them. So when you look back at the Engadget story about China scrambling for H200s, the techno story about Alibaba building Zhenwu 810E, and Microsoft's Maia 200 from MarkTech Post, this Gartner estimate puts a number on what that sovereignty actually costs. It's not just about clever algorithms, it's about massive, sustained capital spending. Now, let's pivot from chips and the infrastructure to AI software and tools, starting with a pretty cool open source release. Story number 5 also comes from MarkTech Post AI News, published January 30th, 2026. DeepSeek AI, the same company in the GPU news, has released DeepSeek-OCR 2, an open source document OCR and understanding system. According to MarkTech Post, the key innovation is something they call a Causal Visual Flow Encoder, embodied in a component called DeepEncoder v2. Instead of treating a page as a static 2D image, DeepSeek-OCR 2 restructures the vision encoder so that it reads pages in a causal order that's closer to how humans scan complex documents, for example, top to bottom, left to right, following columns, and layout. DeepEncoder 5.2 is described as a language model-style transformer that converts a 2D page into a 1D sequence, preserving layout information so the model can understand not just text, but structure, tables, multi-column layouts, forms, and so on. By releasing this as open source, DeepSeek is positioning itself not just as a big GPU consumer, but as a contributor to the broader AI tooling ecosystem. Of course, when you have powerful models and tools, you also need to think hard about how they run and how safely they run. Story number 6 is a developer-focused one from GitHub, highlighted through Hacker News AI topics on January 30th, 2026. It's a project called Amla Sandbox, presented in a Show HN post. According to the GitHub description, Amla Sandbox is a WebAssembly-based sandbox for running LLM-generated code safely. The idea is to give AI agents a bash-like shell environment, but fully contained inside a WASM. Agents can only call tools you explicitly provide, with constraints you define. No Docker, no subprocesses, no SaaS dependencies, just pip install Amla Sandbox and you get a restricted environment. This is part of a growing trend. As more people let AI agents write and execute code, security becomes critical. Amla Sandbox is one answer to the question, how do we let AI act in the world without giving it the keys to the kingdom? And security isn't just about runtime sandboxes, it's also about the humans behind AI. Story number 7 comes from Unwire HK, a Hong Kong tech news outlet, with an article published January 30th, 2026. The headline in Chinese describes how a former Google engineer has been found guilty on all 14 counts related to stealing AI chip trade secrets to help a Chinese startup. According to Unveils HK's report, the U.S. Federal District Court in San Francisco delivered the verdict on January 29th. The defendant, identified as a former Google software engineer and Chinese national, was accused of taking confidential information related to Google's AI chip technology and using it to assist a Chinese startup in the same space. This case underlines the stakes around the AI hardware and intellectual property. When you combine that with Engadget's coverage of US-China tensions over NVIDIA's H200 exports, you see a clear pattern. AI chips and the know-how behind them are now treated as strategic assets, and governments are willing to pursue harsh penalties for unauthorized transfers. Security also matters on the consumer side, not just in giant corporations. Story number 8 is also from Unveils HK, published January 30th, 2026. It covers a popular open-source AI assistant project that's had a bit of an identity crisis and a major security update. The project was originally called ClaudeBot, then renamed Moltbot earlier this week, and has now been rebranded again as OpenClaw. According to Unveils HK, OpenClaw is rolling out 4 major security-related updates. While the article is in Chinese, the gist is that the project is emphasizing stronger safety controls and more robust protections for users, likely including things like better permission handling, safer tool use, and more transparent settings. The fact that a viral open-source AI assistant is prioritizing security and rebranding around that shows how important trust is becoming in this space. So between Amla Sandbox from GitHub via Hacker News and OpenClaw's security-focused updates from Unveils HK, we are seeing both infrastructure level and product level moves to make AI assistants safer and more controllable. But even if you lock down code execution and control access, there's another risk. The AI might just be confidently wrong. Story number 9 is a governance and philosophy piece from Substack, highlighted on Hacker News AI Topics on January 30th, 2026. The post is titled AI Hallucinations Will Expose Flaws in Decision-Making System Governance by Peter on Substack. According to the linked article, the argument is that AI hallucinations, those moments when models invent facts, will act like a stress test for our institutions. If organizations are plugging AI directly into decision-making workflows without proper checks, hallucinations will reveal which systems have good governance and which don't. In other words, the real problem isn't just that AI sometimes lies, it's whether companies and governments have built processes, audits, and accountability around how AI outputs are used. The article suggests that hallucinations will make it very obvious where people have outsourced judgment to machines without proper oversight. That ties back to the security and sandboxing stories. Safe execution is one piece, but safe decision-making is another. And speaking of governance and strategy, let's talk about one of the biggest companies in the world and its AI direction. Story number 10 is a commentary piece from TechCrunch, surfaced on Hacker News AI Topics on January 30th, 2026. The TechCrunch article, published January 29th, 2026, is titled, Guys, I don't think Tim Cook knows how to monetize AI. According to TechCrunch, the author's thesis is that Apple under CEO Tim Cook hasn't yet articulated a clear, compelling strategy for turning its AI investments into meaningful revenue, especially compared to competitors like Microsoft, Google, and even some smaller players. While Apple has been rolling out on-device AI features and branding around things like Apple Intelligence, the article questions whether there's a coherent monetization path beyond just making the iPhone a bit smarter. When you contrast that with Microsoft's Maia 200 chips from MarkTech Post, NVIDIA's dominance in Engadget's coverage, Alibaba's Zhenwu 810E from TechNode, and massive infrastructure investments discussed by the Register, Apple's relatively quiet AI monetization story stands out. Everyone else is betting huge on AI as both a cost center and a revenue driver, while Apple is being criticized for not clearly showing where the AI money comes from. So, tying it all together, from Engage's report on DeepSeek and China's approval to buy NVIDIA H200s to TechNode's coverage of Alibaba's Zhenwu 810E and MarkTech Post's spotlight on Microsoft's Maia 200, we see a global arms race in AI hardware, and Gartner's 1% of GDP estimate via the register shows just how expensive digital sovereignty might be. At the same time, software and tooling are evolving. DeepSeek-OCR tool from MarkTech Post is pushing open-source document understanding forward. Amla Sandbox on GitHub via Hacker News is making AI agent code execution safer, and OpenClaw security updates from Unwire.hk show that even community projects are treating safety as a core feature. On the governance and the legal side, Unwire.hk's report on the ex-Google engineer convicted for stealing AI chip secrets highlights how seriously governments are taking trade secrets in this domain. While Peter's Substack essay on AI hallucinations surfaced on Hacker News argues that our real test isn't just model quality, but whether institutions can handle AI outputs responsibly. And finally, TechCrunch's critique of Apple's AI monetization strategy, again via Hacker News, reminds us that beyond all the tech and policy, there's a business question. Who will actually turn AI into sustainable, defensible revenue, and who might be left behind? If you want to dive deeper, you can check out all the original sources. Engadget Tech News for the NVIDIA and DeepSeek story, TechNote for Alibaba's Zhenwu 810E, MarkTech Post AI News for Maia 200 and DeepSeek-OCR 2, the register for the digital sovereignty and GDP analysis on Wire, HK for the legal case and OpenClaw updates, GitHub and Hacker News for Amla Sandbox, Peter's Substack post on AI hallucinations, and TechCrunch for the Apple monetization debate. That's it for today's AI News Roundup for January 31st, 2026. If you enjoy staying on top of the latest AI developments, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you don't miss future episodes, and let me know in the comments which story you think will have the biggest impact this year: the chip wars, AI safety tools, governance, or big tech's business strategies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.